In the episode The Adventure, the Greedy Queen can cast spells to turn people into stone. I was thinking, what if this is what happened to the gnomes from the fairies? Shoot, that means I'm gonna have to make another video. This episode of Studio Jlam is called Why Am I Still Doing This? So in my last video, I talked about the implications of magic in the Blue universe. This video is gonna be continuing largely from that one, so while it's not required viewing, I do recommend it. But if you don't want to watch it, here's the TLDR. I believe that there are several instances of play pretend in the Healer household that has a supernatural air to it, and that Bingo and Billy might have powers beyond our mortal understanding. So with that out of the way, let's actually talk about today's video. The comment I opened this video with is an interesting one. Last time I briefly mentioned the weird details of gnomes and some quick suggestions of some war between fairies and gnomes, and while I no longer believe that hypothesis for reasons I will get to later, this comment made me look at an episode that I didn't look at originally. The Adventure was always one of my favorite Bluey episodes. It doesn't feel the need to bash you over the head with morals or pull on your heartstrings. It's a simple, fun, play-pretend adventure in the style of a cinematic masterpiece. The jokes land every time if you ignore all the scenes with the terriers. And the cinematic camera angles are so cool, and it's in a stinking 21:9 aspect ratio. I'm a simple man. You give me a cool aspect ratio, I will squeal with joy. But I never thought it important when looking at the lore of this show. I mean, I guess I could have added it to the list of magic wands in Bluey, but that would have added nothing to the discussion because obviously this wand is play pretend. Otherwise the end of the episode would have looked like this. Not pretty. So why am I delving into this episode in particular for this video? The entire concept is that Bluey and Chloe are playing a game, telling the story of this brave princess on her quest to stop the Greedy Queen. A greedy queen with a magic wand and the power to turn people into stone and freeze them. Now, doesn't that sound familiar? But why should it matter when it's all just a game? Well, I have several reasons to conclude that it's a bit more than just a spontaneous play pretend. First of all, we can probably conclude that this isn't the first time they've played this game because of the efficiency at which they play it. And we know for a fact that this isn't the last time they play it because we see them play it again in the background of Army. And second of all, Bluey's is established in episodes like Typewriter to enjoy rewriting stories that she heard to make them work better in her opinion. And after all, I know when I was a kid, I basically never played games where I would completely pull the entire story out of my hat. It would always be me inserting myself into a fictional world, and I know that kind of sounds cringe, but admit it, you did it too. Speaking of you, I have a graph here that says only 1% of you are subscribed. So, well done to the 1%, you get a hot dog. Oh, the rest of you want a hot dog? Well, boo-hoo. It's clear that Bluey must have gotten inspiration for this game from somewhere. And so, what if somehow this story has historical significance? Now, it's hard to pinpoint exactly what Bluey and Chloe added to the story and what it is they borrowed from an actual historic event, but there are several things in their story which we do know exist in the Blueyverse, namely magic wands and fairies. So we can probably conclude that historically there was a greedy queen, and historically fairies stopped her in one way or another. Now, whether or not there was a brave princess or a honey horse is yet to be seen. But hold on a second, I have a genuine question for you. Why is she called the Greedy Queen? Throughout the entire episode, she's referred to in this way, despite doing objectively nothing greedy. Sure, she did some awful stuff, but greedy? No. So why is the one adjective used to describe her a character trait that we never see? How did she even get her hands on a magic wand in the first place when she doesn't even seem to have powers beyond that which the wand give her? And finally, what is the significance of the gnomes? I briefly pointed out their abundance, but they are found mainly in two places. The Healer household and with Calypso. Calypso puts a lot of significance to the gnomes in her stories, characterizing them as wise and protective. So why do I bring this up? Well, in the adventure, the Greedy Queen freezes all the villagers, and what do we see as representative of the frozen villagers? Gnomes. Also, in the very first episode, Magic Xylophone, what does Bandit do with Bluey after freezing her? That's right, use her as a garden gnome. Coincidence? I think not! I've always wanted to say that. And so, using all that, let me spin you my own story. A story of greed, power, and corruption. A story of oppression, fear, and terror. Do I believe this story is perfectly canon? Probably not, but with the information I have, this is the best I got. So, remember, this is just a theory, and enjoy. Once upon a time, there was a kingdom ruled by a queen. She wasn't the best, but she tried her best for the most part and kept a watchful eye over her people. She did, however, have one major flaw. One day, she discovered the presence of dogs with magical powers and the ability to create wands with supernatural abilities in her kingdom. This angered the queen and honestly kind of scared her as well. Other people having more power than her? Preposterous! So she sent out a royal decree that all magic artifacts must be turned into her. This is for their own good, she would say, lest they get a big head and try to revolt. But deep down she knew. She loved the feeling of acquiring more power. Now, the magic users were a bit cheeky, but they had no arguments against this law, so they did what the king commanded. And in fact, the queen rewarded them for cooperation, which kinda angered the other villagers, but as time progressed, the queen got more and more paranoid that others might get more powerful than her. No, only she can have power. Only she can rule! So, when she heard tale of another kingdom approaching on her land, she took matters into her own hands. Using the magic artifacts, she ravaged the opposing kingdoms, turning their townfolks into stone and their crops into stone. Until one day, the magical fairies had had enough. They recruited a princess, or maybe they did themselves, see, history forgot. But one way or another, they went into one last battle, and the greedy queen did not emerge from it. But that is not where the story ends, because the citizens of both kingdoms, while resentful of their former tyrant, directed their anger towards the magic wielders that enabled her reign. The new queen sent out a decree forbidding all magic, and the fairies went into hiding. But the magic users would not go down without a fight. Unfortunately, this angered the new ruler even more. She locked them up in a prison, but feared they would simply escape using their magic powers. So she sought to relocate them. After all, the prisons were getting a bit overpopulated. And so they were shipped to Australia with other prisoners, mirroring real-life penal colonies. The trip was a long and painful one, and things did not get better after arriving there. Songs were written at the time which are still sung to this day.
Sunday morning as I went walking by Brisbane waters,
And yes, I heard you snicker at the term penal colonies. You children! So in the new land, magic users were forced to stop using magic. And to remind them of the atrocities they caused, little stone gnomes were crafted to populate the houses of the magic users and even the schools they go to, so that every time they look at the gnomes, they would remember the rules and what they did. The magic users were also forced to marry non-magic users to hopefully dilute the gene pool until all magic completely vanishes. Hundreds of years went by, and over time, rulers died and new ones took their place. Some things were lost to history. Many now forget that magic still remains among them, but the rules and traditions are still in place, holding down our current generation of favorite red healers to this day. So yeah, that's my theory. Admittedly, this one's a bit more speculative than the last one, but it's the nature of some theories. It also doesn't really line up with the comment at the top of this episode or my quickfire theories in the last video, but I like it. I'm no longer convinced that the gnomes as creatures ever existed. I mean, we know the fairies do, but we never really got confirmation from the gnomes. And after all, it is kind of weird to sell corpses of a dead race at a store. So the only evidence we have for gnomes' existence is Calypso's stories. But she also talks about father, sons, and brother winds. So I'm not sure how accurate her stories are, or if it's all just government-mandated propaganda to keep the magic users down, and the gnomes being characterized as protective might just be revolutionist history. Interesting thing though, Chili doesn't seem to follow the rules correctly. Using her magic for something as petty as someone telling her to take her elbows off the table on asparagus is definitely not something that's allowed. And with Bingo's powers growing every day, it's not long until someone notices. In fact, someone already has. Someone who's been watching them and is in almost every episode that magic is used. Watch your back, healers, for Lucky's dad knows more than he lets on. Before I go, I just want to make one more observation. It might seem a bit odd to be dissecting the stupid toddler dog show in this way, but first of all, it's clear that the creators of this show are smart people who know and do more than they let on. And second of all, the show Bluey itself is known to repeatedly keep important details in the background to not distract from the main plot of the episodes. After all, Bluey's dad is an archaeologist. This is a sentence that is never once said in the entire show. but is still very clearly communicated through facts like background details, his office, and the books that he reads. So I don't think we are reading too much into this. In fact, I think we're only scratching the surface. What other background details are we looking over and ignoring that might have big implications? I'm actually really curious and need some of your help figuring it out, so leave a comment and join me in the next video where I will explain why the Long Dog is actually an ancient interdimensional demigod. But hey, that's just a glam, a studio glam! Thanks for watching. Go check out my last video about magic. It's sure to make this one make a lot more sense, or if you prefer something a little less theoretical about Bluey, then watch this video where I talk about the show just in general. I'm Joel Lamb. Have a wonderful day.